Dear students, today I am here to discuss one of the stories written by Somerset Maugham. It is one of the proses prescribed for BCom First Semester AECC English. Before discussing the story, The Verger, I would like to focus on the writer and his biographical note. Somerset Maugham, born in 1874 January, means at the later part of the 19th century, British novelist, playwright, short story writer, and essayist. One interesting thing about Somerset Maugham is he is the most and highest paid writer during the time of 1930s. Means whatever the book he wrote during the time, it had been sold, and also he got the highest payment out of it. So for that reason, he was considered as the highest paid writer during 1930s. When we look into his childhood time, it was so pathetic because at the age of 10, he lost his parents. And that loss made him to be in loneliness. How much loneliness he had experienced during that time. And also, the life has given many opportunities to expose himself to the different kind of people. And that kind of, the experience probably help him to be a very good creative writer. And basically, he is a medicinal doctor, but he did not practice medicines for a long time. Later, he switched to creative writing and he succeeded and he got the biggest profit out of it when it comes to the commercial point of view or when it comes to the economical strength and through the creative writing. And Somerset Maugham served as the ambulance driver during the First World War and also worked as a spy. And he is the man of exploration. He traveled different countries across the globe. He visited India, China, almost all the European countries. And this kind of exploration, expose, and studying the different, tradition, culture of the different countries, and probably had given a lot of experience to Somerset Maugham, and that made him to be one of the greatest writers of 19th century. With this brief note, now I discuss one of the beautiful stories written by Somerset Maugham. The title of the story is The Verger. The Verger is one of the persons, one of the workers who work for a church. Vicar is the supreme in the church premises, like a headman, and Verger works under him like manager to have the comparison to him, and he manages everything in the premises. In this story, you remember one of a few key points because based on that, maybe the question can be asked in the examination. The church name, what comes in the story is St. Peter's Neville Square. In this church, Albert Edward Foreman, I repeat the name, Albert Edward Foreman, is working as the verger in that church. And since 16 years, he is in the service at the church premises. And you can come across the vicar who had an elaborate conversation in the story, and two church wardens who brings a drastic change in the life of the workers. And these are all the key points you should remember in the story. And also you can see that the worker had the conversation with his wife, and also at the end of the story the bank manager also had the conversation. Somerset Maugham is not only the story writer, he is also a very famous playwright. So one unique thing what I find in that story is the technique what he had used is, it's not the writer who is the storyteller. He is not talking about the story. He is not narrating the story. In fact, here and there he narrates the story, what happens in the life of the central figure or the protagonist of the story, the worker. And the writer, Somerset Maugham, had given more space for the characters to have the conversation or to deliver their dialogues on their own. It's more about the direct conversation, direct delivery of the words, direct delivery of the speech by each and every character, whoever comes in the story. So at the beginning of the story, Somerset Maugham introduced the church and the worker, his name. And one interesting thing about this worker is how much he loves his profession, how much dedication he had been showing to his profession, how much love he has for his profession. And in the description about this worker's routine and how he had been living the life, at the end of the first paragraph, Somerset Maugham talks about the worker Edward Foreman. During the 16 years he had been worker of this church, he had had a succession of such gowns, but he had never been able to throw them away when they were worn out, and the complete series neatly wrapped up in brown paper in the bottom drawers of the wardrobe in his bedroom. Means every year in that church they used to give the gowns to the workers, church wardens, and all the workers over there based on their positions, the different, it's like providing the uniforms to them, which is suitable to their profession. Every year the gown is given to this Edward Foreman. He used to collect the new one, and he never ever thrown out the old one. What he used to do? He used to wash it properly, iron them properly, and wrap in a brown paper and keep it in the safe locker. Means that much of the respect he has for his profession, and he loves the gown what he generally wears in the premises of the church. And also he treats that gown as the more valuable one than any gold or something. So for that reason he used to keep it in his bedroom locker. And the rest of the story talks about, so after this you can see the elaborate conversation takes place between the worker and the vicar in the church. So the story, when writer narrates, the scene sets in the premises of the church, and a naming ceremony was taking place of a child, and he prays, the child's whose naming ceremony was taking place. The child was crying like anything. When Vicar took the child in his hand, immediately the child stops crying and started to smile. That is noticed by the Verger, and he told to Vicar that maybe you have that kind of magic. See, sir, when you took the child in your hand, the child stopped crying and started to smile. Maybe it's a kind of magic you have in your hand. Vicar felt very happy, and the then immediately he told to the Verger, you come to my, the vestry, that is the private room of Vicar. I would like to talk to you personally. The Verger did not understand. In fact, he was in a hurry to go to home and have his evening cup of tea, which is a kind of relaxing thing for him. But he cannot deny the order of the his supreme, that is Vicar. Then he moved into his personal vestry to have the conversation with the Vicar. So when he had been to the vestry of the Vicar, he was very much shocked. It was so shocking because already there were two men, two church wardens, and these two church wardens had a great jealous on this man, the Verger, because he is very much dedicated person, determined person, and also had a great respect for the church. And from morning when he comes, he is the first person who opens the lock of the church gate. He is the last person who locks the church gate and goes to his home. And completely he had been into the church premises and extending all type of service. Everyone whoever visit the church, they praise Edward like anything. They love Edward like anything. Everyone asks about him. And when the contemporaries, like these two church wardens, they had a great jealous on this person. Somehow they want to, remove this person from the church. Somehow they wanted to, put a black spot on his character. But since many years, in all these 16 years, they had been trying, but they failed. But this time, they got an opportunity to, bite the ears of the new vicar. This new vicar had come, and he had given the ears to these two church wardens, and whatever they said, he used to believe. So, this Verger, Edward Foreman, he knows it very well. These two church wardens, they don't like me. They had a great jealous on me. And why these two persons are here? That too in his very personal vestry. It was so shocking and surprising to him. And later you can see in the further part of the story, an elaborate conversation takes place, direct conversation takes place. And that conversation I treat it as the central theme of the story. And when Verger get into the vestry of Vicar, and he began his conversation. I just read it as it is in the text. It is the dialogue of the Vicar who is talking to the Verger. Foreman, we have got something rather unpleasant to say to you. You have been here a great many years, and I think His Lordship and the General agree with me that you have fulfilled the duties of your office to the satisfaction of everybody concerned. And he talked about the Verger with a great appreciation, because to anybody, when he talks about the Verger, everyone talks about his sincerity, his dedication, and what the great things he has done for the church and its welfare. And that is what he mentioned in the first dialogue. And later, uh, he continued with his dialogue. And he continued, but a most extraordinary circumstance came to my knowledge the other day, and I felt it my duty to impart it to the churchwardens. I discovered to my astonishment that you could neither read nor write. Okay? He said it on the face of the Verger. It was so shocking for me. You are in the position of a Verger. It's like on a manager post for you, and it requires basic qualification of the Verger is he must know reading and writing. He must be literate. But when I came here, it was so shocking for me that you are illiterate. You don't know reading and writing. Even then, you have been in this position since 16 years. And then the Verger, see, the Verger's face, when you look at, he is not dull when the vicar talks about his illiteracy, and no embracement, sign of embracement on his face, but he stayed away, told to the vicar that, yes, my lord, I don't know reading and writing, but if this matter is known to all the vicars who had been there in your position earlier. And also he states it very clearly, the reading and writing, not knowing reading and writing never ever brought any change in my service. It never be a kind of hurdle to my service. And he also states that since 16 years, never learned to read or write, but in my service, I am so prompt. In my service, I am so determined. But Vicar is not ready to accept this fact. For him, the principles matter, prudence matters, not the sincerity, not the dedication, what the love the Verger had for his profession and how much he has done for the church is not at all a matter. The matter, what matters to the vicar and the church wardens is his illiteracy. So for that reason, a kind of conversation continues between the vicar and the Verger, and he tells it very clearly that the Verger, I have never really found the want of it. In fact, he told, sir, when I began my service, I was the age of 12 years. It was inevitable in my life that I need to start with any kind of work. So I started to work as a butler in the kitchen. And in fact, there my cook tried to teach me reading and writing, but I did not learn that. Maybe I thought that it was not my cup of tea. I think a lot of these young fellows, and he made a remark that I have never really found the want of it. No, because uh, not knowing reading and writing never ever become a big issue for me in my life. Never ever become a big problem in my life. I never thought that it is very essential in my life. I think a lot of these young fellows waste a rare lot of time reading when they might be doing something useful. This is what his perception for the life. So, literacy alone cannot build your career. That's what the perception of the worker. Even if I'm illiterate, but I can show all my dedication to my service in all these 16 years. Without that also, I had given the best service to the church. That's what his perception for his profession. But don't you want to know the news and other things? The church wardens and the vicar, when they asked about it, sir, nowadays in the newspapers they used to give some pictures with the words and letters, and through that I try to understand what's going on in my surrounding. And also, if the question comes or the matter comes to write a letter, my wife is little educated and she knows reading and writing, and she had that kind of scholarship. She used to write the letter for me, and that is how I had been managing all these things. But vicar is predetermined already, and they want to make this illiteracy of the worker is the major reason somehow to remove him from the church and from his position. They want to use it as the strongest tool to remove him. So for that reason, they are not ready to accept whatever the justification the worker had given to them. So later the conversation continues. In the entire conversation, we'll come to know that the worker had given a chance to the worker, vicar had given the chance to the worker, Edward Foreman, at the end of their conversation, that I'm so much pleased by the service whatever you had given to the church for a long period of time. Keeping that thing in my mind, I give 3 months time for you, and in that 3 months you should know reading and writing. You should able to read and write so that I can continue in your position. Otherwise, I'm very sorry, you need to go to your home, leaving this position. So this is the end of their conversation in the mid part of the story. So after that, in all these 16 years of his service, he never ever thought of to do something else in his life. He never ever thought of to leave the church. Without the church, he never imagined his life. And he became so dull, pathetic, and he started to move towards his home. On his way, and he was so much tensed, and also started to dream of started to think of in a very negative way. And suppose the situation comes, I must leave the church and they remove me from my burgher's position. I have nothing to do except this profession. I don't know anything else except this profession because I'm so habituated to this. But based on the little amount of money what I gathered, on that only I cannot lead, I cannot survive. What remains is my death. Suppose I get suicide, how this vicar in the church premises phrases me, how people gathers there, how do they cry because of the death of this Verger, that is Edward Foreman. He started to imagine all these kind of future, suppose I'm being removed from my position. And in that deep thought, instead of going in the way which can lead to his home, he lost his way took the different direction and moved into the different road. And all of a sudden, he comes back to his consciousness and looks around, and he was so tensed and full of, the stress. Generally, this Verger never smoke, but when he is full of stress and tension, he needs a cigarette so that he can come out of the stress. So for that, he looks in the surrounding to find a shop where he can buy the tobacco or the cigarette, but he did not find a single tobacco shop. Then the new thought arises in his mind. See, many people moves in this road, but in surrounding there is no single shop where people can buy at least a cigarette. The new thought arises, and with that new thought he goes to home, discussed with his wife, but initially his wife denies that you are working as a worker, and how can you come to reduce yourself and start with the new business, to start up with the new shop like in a tobacconist, considering yourself as a tobacconist. But he says that to his wife, and you had to move with the times. Means, however, many a time we can have the plannings for the life, but life has its own plannings for us. So many times we are unable to execute all our plannings. But when the God decides to go with this plan, and we have to move with that. That is what the positive attitude of the worker, which can be a kind of role modeling character to us. So he decides, instead of thinking and keeping himself in a sorrow, pathetic, and going in the depression, he decides that at this age, I cannot learn reading and writing. I don't want to waste my time. And better I can shift myself to the new area, with a new vision, and start working for it. So that is how he started a new tobacco shop, and he started to work as a tobacconist. And slowly he started to gain the profit. Then he thought of, why can't I start with the new shop in the new area where many roads meet and public gathers, but there is no shop? He started to do the survey. When he finds that kind of area, again he started a new shop there. And in the old shop, he kept one manager, and he shifted to new one, started to work for. And slowly he started to think of, if a man can start two shops and runs at a time, and why can't he start 6, 10 furthermore shops? And he goes across the London city wherever he got the opportunity, and think of, if we start with the new shop in that particular area, he can get the profit. Then he used to start it, and money started to accumulate. Then he thought that keeping that much of huge amount of money in home is not safe. Then he used to go to bank and credit all his amount to his account. So one day, when he had been to a bank to credit the money, and a attender called Edward and asked him, our manager wants to meet you and talk to you. And then he had been to the manager's chamber, and manager asked, sir, do you know how much money have you saved in our account? Literally, the worker, Edward, did not have any idea about it, proper idea. He said that maybe a pound or two, sir. And then the manager tells it is so shocking to him. Apart from what you paid in this morning, it's a little over 30,000 pounds. Just imagine It's not he is able to earn in one day or in one month. It's a years together effort. A decade's time he worked for the shops, means 10 years he worked for, and he reached to this status and considered him as the successful businessman, successful tobacconist in London city, and by earning 30,000 pounds. And then the manager asked, "Sir, instead of leaving the money in this account, better to invest this money?" And he said that, "I don't have any idea about the share marketing or something. I never thought that that is so secure without having any idea. If I start to invest, if I lose that money, I scare for it." That is genuinely accepts. Then the bank manager said that, "We give all the security. I need not to worry about it. We do everything. Just you have to put a signature for the agreement copy." But what agreement is, I don't know, the Verger tells. "Sir, we write everything in the agreement. You read it and understand. If you are okay with that, you put a signature." Then this Edward tells that, "Dear manager, I don't know reading and writing. I'm totally illiterate." "Sir, but you put your signature." "I can able to put my signature because when I become a businessman, my wife told me, at least you know, you learn how to put your signature. She taught me, I started to put my signature in words." Oh my God, it was so shocking to the manager. Then he tells that, "Sir, how come it is possible a man with illiteracy and succeeded as the very successful businessman, and now he is the owner of 30,000 pounds. How could it be possible?" And he stood from his chair and shows his shockingness, surpriseness. And then he tells, and the last remark, the managers, "Do you mean to say that you have built up this important business and amassed a fortune of 30,000 pounds without being able to read or write? Good God, man, what would you be now if you had been able to?" Means the manager asked the Verger, "Suppose you know reading and writing, and how much successful person you would be. Without that, you earned 30,000 pounds. Suppose you are literate, maybe it is the double of it and tenth of it." Then the foreman, Edward Foreman, tells to the manager, "I can tell you that, sir," said Foreman, a little smile on his still aristocratic features, "I would be Verger of St. Peter's Naval Square. If I know reading and writing, I never ever thought of to be a businessman. I never ever stood as the successful businessman today. Probably I would be the Verger in the church called the St. Peter's Naval Square." So this is the end of the story. So this story tells that, suppose man, when he all the doors closes to him, he should not undergo the disparity. He should not lose his confidence. If he opens his eyes, look at the teeny things, maybe that is the new way for him to have the aspirations for the life, and that would bring the brightness in the life. That is what the Verger has done in the story. In this way, the Verger stands as the model to all the youngsters who loses the hope, thinking that all the doors shuts for me. But the God opens at least one door for us. We need to search for it. These words I conclude with the story. We'll see you in the next class with the other story. Thank you.